Hi, welcome everyone to my senior project presentation. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the judges. I wanted to let everyone know, and I doubt this will be a problem, but I do cover some sensitive subjects, mainly abuse, so if at any point you feel uncomfortable, feel free to step outside. And please, I ask you to be quiet. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is EJ, and my project was on the abuse of LGBTQA students. And what that acronym is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning, and asexual or aromantic people. That's quite a mouthful. So if any of those terms confused you, I'd be happy to explain them at the end. For the purpose of my presentation, I will be using the word queer as a blanket term. It used to be seen as more offensive, but is now considered a roof those people can fit under. So I had a question. Did you know that 20% of our student body here identifies as gay, bisexual, or questioning their sexuality? Because I didn't. I did an anonymous survey at the beginning of the year to sort of get some more information for my research paper. And I also found that 15% of our student body would feel unsafe telling their classmates or friends that. This inspired me to advocate for the safety and protection of queer students in public school. The way I see it, they don't need special treatment, just equal treatment. So, I wanted to create an educational piece of poetry because I've always loved poetry, and I felt that was a good way to reach out to those who might feel confused or scared, parents and people who just aren't educated on it, because I don't want it to be a butting of heads. So for my research paper, I learned quite a lot, including that there are huge amounts of people in the middle of the country, what they call the Bible Belt, that don't feel safe at all. There are actually states where the state actively oppresses queer people, especially young people, because they're impressionable. And so I learned that I believe human rights outweigh state rights. And for me that was a big leap, because I also really value state rights and having independence to move freely without the federal government becoming too involved. But my claim was that queer students in public schools should have a federal law that protects them from discrimination. And I found that there are some similarities that can be drawn between the way transgender students are treated today and segregation prior to the Civil War and after. So I found some interesting facts when I asked the question, are students safe and secure? And one of those was that 2 of the top 3 reasons for bullying have to do with actual or perceived sexual orientation or gender expression. And what this actually means is that not only are homosexual or transgender students being bullied for their identity, but a straight student could also be being bullied for being gay. And this starts as just a slur, but it evolves into a breeding ground for hate. What it becomes is school, public school, becomes a place where it is not only seen as okay, but it is almost encouraged to discriminate. And people who are questioning their sexuality then, or their identity, don't feel safe doing so or opening up to anyone. There are actually states such as Utah, Texas, Alabama, and there were 5 others that actually have state laws prohibiting any mention of homosexuality at school. So it isn't just a school rule, it's actually seen as harmful, and parents can get banned from visiting their students at school or from picking them up. And furthermore, even students can get banned from attending that state school, and their family has to move. So there are, for the project, I wanted to do something about these laws mainly. I had no knowledge of working with law, but I did have knowledge of poetry, and I hoped that maybe I could open up people's hearts. When I first started this project, my mentor was concerned, Mitch Mendoza, that I would undertake a rant piece, and that wasn't my goal, but I wasn't really sure how to make an educational piece. So it started with the first step of interviewing. And I had some practice interviewing people before, but I also have this huge fear of talking on the phone with strangers. And I got in contact with the LGBT Resource Center of San Francisco. There are a couple there. And they helped me by getting me in touch with a volunteer they had named Chris. Chris was extremely helpful. He was a transgender young man himself, and he helped me by putting up posters in the Resource Center that then people could call or email me. First I was really nervous about this because he said they get a lot of foot traffic, but it ended up being a great thing. I heard from about 40 people, and I could only really use about 20 of those people. So what I'd do is I would interview them over the phone. It didn't usually take long. But what would happen is they were really opening up to a complete stranger because they knew that they were completely anonymous. Most of these people, I never knew their names. And the demographic was mainly between the ages of 12 and 25, with a few outliers that were 35 and around that area. And I also, through some friends that I've made, I got to interview two people from the East Coast and 3 people from the middle of the country where they have the hardest, including one of my friends who was in Michigan, who was extremely helpful. And the second part was them taking all that information I'd gathered and writing the piece. I wanted to preserve their anonymous, and my promise that I would keep them anonymous. And I wanted to make it personal. And those things kind of clashed, so what I ended up doing was condensing them. I combined a couple of people's stories into a couple of fictional people. I used fake names, and I also used a broad approach with metaphor to help other people see what it might feel like to put themselves into others' shoes. So for maybe peers or parents, it would be easier to understand what exactly that abuse felt like. Because sometimes abuse is only bullying, and that might not be super extreme, but there's always the home aspect. And the third stage was creating a video using a green screen, actually this one and this right here. And I performed in front of an audience and recorded myself and was able to make it into a neat video I could share online. At the end of this project, I was very pleased with the outcome. It was a lot of work, and I have, in the past, especially over high school, been the type of person to give myself these big projects and then not finish them. So being able to open up and ask for help was a big deal. This year really taught me how to do that. I had a lot of amazing help from my mentor and from Ms. Campbell and from Nat. I had so much support from adults that would, help me stay motivated. Mainly my mentor. He kept me motivated because I would start to think, oh, well, I've read his book, but I can't work on it, or oh, I'm never going to finish this in time. I said, no, you'll get it. And I did. And the other skill was what I mentioned before, which was talking on the phone with strangers. That was really hard, and I feel I've gotten much better at it. I also use that skill in talking to representatives of colleges, and that was a big deal for me. I feel I made a big leap and bound, because I remember little junior high me couldn't have done it. I probably would have hung up on the people. And now we're going to watch the video. But I've already said it a million times, but I wanted to make some more thank yous. Thank you to the judges so much for creating my project. Thank you so much to the adults that helped me, including my mother and my brother, who unfortunately couldn't be here, and my mentor, and my friends. And thank you to the audience, because even if not all of you are here by choice, I appreciate you being respectful. Wearing a snapback, 1, 2, 3, slap back, says, welcome home, dear, drenched stench of stale beer. I didn't do that. Yes, I look more flat. I am your son, Mum. I am your son. Screaming and hitting, now it's beginning. Kill your daughter, I'd never, I swear, sir. He's an only child. lacking companion. They claim they can't love him. He's breaking their hearts. There was one other little tidbit I forgot to mention, which is just that the music used in it was one of the bumps I hit. I had to find something that wasn't copyrighted, and lucky enough for me, my music production class with Mr. Snyder was doing a composition project at the time, and that was my first time composing, and we had a string quartet come in that we were able to record, and that was my piece that I wrote, and it ended up working. Are there any questions?
So judges are going to start with questions. I'll let you go. Could you describe the process of you started to talk about how you actually wrote the spoken word. You compiled the stories that you got from people. So I guess one thing I was wondering, describe the process a little bit, and what was it like to use these stories from people you actually didn't know?
It was emotional. It was a lot of editing my notes because I had very vague notes, and I kept it that way for a reason. I put down anything that struck out to me as important. I would also make note if there was a repeated subject. If I'd already talked to someone who had almost the same experience, I would just make I kept tally marks. And so when I actually came to writing a poem, I'd never written something from something. Normally when I write, it comes straight from my head to the paper and it just sort of flows out. So it was a lot of letting the inspiration come and then taking it. It was kind of like putting a puzzle together. And I had literally like note cards and scraps everywhere, and I would sit down on the floor and be covered in them. And I had my Word document in front of me, and I would just start taking this and write it, take this and write it, and take this, write it, and then go back and revise it, take this and write it, and a lot of taking things out and bringing things in. And my first version was too short, my second version was way too long. I finally got one that was about 5 minutes, but yeah, it was a lot of, my best metaphor is a puzzle, because each person was like a puzzle piece, and some of them would overlap a little bit.
So, EJ, my impression was that your project was writing a poem, but in fact you wrote a poem, you created a video, and you created a musical composition to make this all go. So very impressive and really powerful. And can you talk about what was the most satisfying part of it?
The most satisfying part was probably editing it. Because editing for me in the past has never been something so personal. It's always like, I mean, obviously I try to make videos about something I enjoy, but I've always done like little short edits of something that's already made, or I'll go film an event or something. It never really was that connected for me. And then here I was writing about something that not only did I care about personally, but I'd talked to these people, and then now I've written this poem and I had to hear my own voice reading it back, and there's a couple times where something would be so intense, I'd be like, there's no way to make this look the way I want it to, what can I do? And so my mentor suggested use of putting words, which it really added to it. It was so intense. But yeah, I think the writing was the best part, especially the day I finished editing it. I was so relieved. I mean, Orion earlier, he presented, and I was fortunate enough to see him, and he said that he spent hours here editing, and I was lucky enough to see part of that, because I was here editing as well for part of that, and we sort of buckled down and worked together. So.
You're so passionate about this, where next? I mean, what do you want to, you talked about the government, and not knowing enough about politics, but what do you want to do with this? Because it's so good.
I want to help people feel connected ultimately. I see a lot of bantering back and forth. I see something that really upsets me is when I see people from the LGBTQA community who hate straight people. That really upsets me, because I mean, I was born from straight people, my parents are straight, so to try to think, you know, oh, they're all enemies just because they're not the same as me, that's the same mindset that they have, and I feel that's very counterproductive. It's very counterproductive. So I try to take the mindset that people need to learn to communicate with each other and to understand each other. So as far as activism goes, my approach would probably be just creating educational opportunities for people. I personally want to go into history, so I wouldn't really have an opportunity to talk about these subjects necessarily unless I was addressing, maybe if I ended up having a unit on gay history or something. But when it comes down to it, it isn't what I would be doing for a job, but it's important to me going forward.
I have to tell you, you did the video.
Yes.
I did professional video and photography for a career. That was stunning.
Thank you.
I want to say, make a comment about that question, is something that, in your presentation, changed my perspective on something. Thinking about LGBTQA issues and problems, and like you to focus on abuse and bullying, we tend to think of that as being a problem for that community. And you succeeded in bridging that by saying that, even perceived, you can have somebody of any sexual orientation or being perceived in some way incorrectly, whether correctly or incorrectly by others. So really, this becomes a problem for everybody. So how do we communicate that to our school community and our community in general?
The problem is that stereotypes in themselves can be fun, but the more they become rehearsed, the more people distance themselves from what they mean, and the more people who are first time experiencing them, maybe junior high kids or children at home, they just start repeating it like on loop, and they start to believe it. By the time they're an adult, they're homophobic, and they weren't homophobic when they were in high school, and it's just, they have no reason to necessarily feel it. Maybe they're not even a religious person, which, not all religious people are homophobic. It's this idea that you can't, believe in one thing and also respect those around you. And that's really spread with children and parents. I really addressed family life because it's a big common thing where parents are just too scared to accept it. There's a lot of kids that are kicked out of their homes. It's huge numbers, and I do have one little number that really upset me, and that's that the second leading cause of death for teenagers is suicide, and for every LGBTQA person, you are 4 times more likely to commit suicide before 18. 4 times. And some of these people, maybe they've never told anyone about it, but just by hearing what's going on around them, they start hating themselves. It's really scary.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, we have time for maybe like 1 or 2 questions from the audience.
Okay, so as an English teacher and a fan of poetry, I really liked your original poem. It's cool that you actually compiled something from like a list of stuff, ideas you've gotten, which is like a good thing. But I get a sense where you get your inspiration from. Could you maybe expand on which poets that are inspirations to you when you write your own, like contemporary or modern?
This may seem silly, but Shel Silverstein is my biggest influence. There are the people that have read my poems and said, this really reminds me of Shel Silverstein. And that's because growing up, I had this one book, Where the Sidewalk Ends, that I would read over and over and over. I would recite the poetry to my family. So that really influenced the way I write. I also am a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe, so there comes in more solemn and,
Right.
yeah.
I noticed there was like subtle rhyme scheme, but most of it was but yeah, and I drew other poets out of it as well, but also Paul, you have a printed like an email the poem you can share?
I do have a version of the poem I could share.
Time for one more question?
Yes, go ahead.
Are you gonna share this poem publicly, like the video for
The
it?
video is already on YouTube. Right now it's private because I wanted to wait until I'd shown it to this audience. And it's going to be public as soon as tonight. And I'm believing I'll probably put the poem itself on either in the description of it or on the website called The Poetry, and there will be a link. Because if anyone's interested in my poetry, that's where I post it.
Thank you very much.